AAUW is me.
I wanted to meet some new people and do some different things. And I also wanted to be part of an organization that had a social commitment to young women and the community at large.
I want to be a contributing member of an organization where women help women in promoting education, in making friends, in entertaining one another, and in sharing ideas about this world.
Women would want to join the AAUW because we have a very fierce commitment to equality and equity for women and girls. And if that's something that you're interested in, this is one of the best venues to help channel that energy.
Hello, welcome to AAUW Connections. Tonight we're going to be talking about a topic that most of us will in fact need at some point in our lives, but we would rather not think of it until we do. But it's a very important issue, and that is the whole issue of grief counseling, of dealing with grief in many forms. And with us tonight to talk about this, we have two representatives of CARA, which is a grief counseling organization. And we have Jim SANTUCCI, who is the Director of Development and Operations, and SHELLY GILLAN, who is the Director of Client Services. So, SHELLY, since I understand you've been there a little longer, tell us a little bit about how CARA was formed, how it was formed, why, that sort of thing, a little background.
So CARA was started in the early 1970s. There was a movement for peer counseling. A young doctor who was doing his residency in San Francisco at UCSF, Dr. Charles Garfield, had gone to many bedsides of dying patients and realized that they didn't need a psychologist. They needed someone who could sit and listen. And so he did his thesis on peer counseling and trained many volunteers. And about that time, the AIDS epidemic had broke out in San Francisco. And he created the Shanti Project. And so CARA was originally called Shanti Palo Alto.
So the original Shanti Project was in San Francisco, and this
Oakland.
was,
Yes.
and Oakland.
Yes. And what we realized early on is that after family and friends had died, there was a vast majority of people left behind. And so we extended the peer counseling to those who were grieving the loss of a loved one. And so since 1976, we have been offering support in our community.
That's a long time, a long history. And Jim, how did you come in to, how did you come to be associated with CARA?
Well, I came first to CARA as a client back in the fall of 2008, and I experienced personal loss and was looking for some support, and came, and I just knew I was in the right place, and it was the place that was going to help me out. And after getting some support as a client, I then became a volunteer. Took a little hiatus. They like you to do that. You want to make sure you have a chance to sort of get your help and then take some time. And I came back as a volunteer, and been volunteering for a little over a year and a half, and started in January as a staff member.
Okay, so you've been a staff member for about 6 months.
About 6 months, yeah, and been part of the agency for almost 4 years now.
Now, what area does CARA serve?
We serve primarily the peninsula. Most of the clients that come to CARA for services come to Palo Alto. But we have served clients in the East Bay, on the coast, San Francisco, as far south as Gilroy. So we primarily are in central Palo Alto area.
So most of your clients are, say, from San Mateo and Santa Clara counties?
Most, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And how many, in an average year, about how many clients do you serve?
This past year, we probably saw a little over 1,000 clients at any one time. So, 1,000 different people came and got support. Beyond that, though, when we talk about our community outreach program and we go and serve agencies and communities and schools, that number really is close to over 3,000 when you look at all the people that we serve, not only as individual clients and group clients, but those that we go out and serve agencies and organizations. So it's quite the large organization, and we do it
Obviously.
with, mostly with volunteers.
And how many volunteers do you have?
Anywhere between 120 to 150.
Well, that's a large core of engineers, of volunteers.
they-
Maybe some of them are engineers.
Some of them are. That is absolutely true. And they come from all walks of life, and typically people who've experienced loss themselves, and they want to give back in some way, and we train them.
That's what I was going. When someone decides, when steps forward and said, "I would like to be a volunteer," what's the process that they go through?
Well, we actually have now an information night where we invite people to come in and hear about our agency. And we have gotten to the point where we actually have more people that want to volunteer than we actually have
Well,
space
that's a
for.
happy situation, isn't it?
And so we are very fortunate because the screening is quite extensive. And the training is over 25 hours. And the commitment itself to the program is a minimum of 1 year and about 15 to 20 hours a week. And that's the reason for that is when someone has had someone significant die, particularly with children, they need to have continuity.
Oh, sure.
And so we really do screen our volunteers for this
Yeah.
work.
And do you? It sounds so not crass, but when you're screening them, obviously you're trying to find people who have the skills and who will be empathetic. And do you also check people's public records to make sure that this isn't someone with a police record?
All of our volunteers do have to have fingerprinting.
Okay.
Because we work with children.
Sure.
And so all of our volunteers have to go through a background check.
So there's and then you said 15 to how many hours of training?
So it's 25 hours, and then there is ongoing training every month.
Oh, so when an individual comes in for counseling and they are assigned to whichever volunteer, they can feel really secure that that person has been trained, this is a safe person to whom you can talk.
Yes.
You know, that's now one of the things that interested me when we were talking before we went on the air that I hadn't really thought about is yes, grief counseling. But it then occurred to me as we spoke that there are a lot of different kinds of grief. My first instinct, and probably many people's, you think of grief and you think of someone dying, and of course that is grief. But you were mentioning that there are other kinds of grief,
Sure.
and that you deal with.
Yes, yes. One of them is the work that we do with first responders. So these are firefighters and police officers. We collaborate with Palo Alto. These men and women go out every day and are trained to deal with the crisis, but their training isn't necessarily to deal with being with a family who's just had a child who's died, or even giving them the information that a family member has just.
Think of how difficult that must be.
Yeah.
And
To
so
have to
we
deliver that information.
Yeah, it's very hard for them. And so we spend a lot of time with the fire department and the police department in supporting them and offering debriefings for them in a way that's safe and respectful of their profession.
And then, as we were talking about earlier, some counseling for them as well as the person who is constantly. That's your life. Your work life is constantly delivering or dealing with really tragic, horrible news.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. In fact, we call it critical stress management debriefing is actually what we call it. And we go into communities or agencies or like first responders where there's a high level. In fact, even we have a support group for professional caregivers. Again, that's about managing a profession that has a high level of stress. Their training doesn't really incorporate the emotional management that comes with that job.
And that makes me think about caregivers who are family members. Obviously, very stressful. Do you have support groups for them as well?
So in our professional caregivers group, we do. As far as for caregivers, if they are supporting a family member who has been diagnosed with a terminal illness that's within approximately a 2-year span, we can actually support the anticipation of that person's death for that family member or loved one who is providing the care.
That's interesting because I've observed in my own life where very often when someone is terminal in a family, for example, the rest of the family afterwards, when that person finally does pass, they've in many ways done a lot of their grieving already. Maybe not well, but they've come to that realization long before the actual event.
Right.
So it makes sense that that would be a good time
Yes.
to be working with them. Now, you have a number of different programs, I notice.
Yes.
And you have peer counseling, you have peer support. What is peer counseling and what are peer support groups?
So we actually have peer support and we also have therapy services. So the two that we provide, peer support is really someone who has been through a life experience that may have been similar to yours or not, that is trained to really listen and companion you. Normalize what feels abnormal. A lot of times people are frightened because things in their world has just completely been turned upside down. And so there's someone there who's a little further down the path that can say, yeah, I remember feeling that way. I can remember thinking that way. So we're not pathologizing, we're not diagnosing, we're acknowledging that you're going through a natural process called grief.
Now, Jim, coming to the agency as you did, first as a client, then as a volunteer,
Right.
now as a staff member, you're probably able to bring a lot of different perspectives. Do you interact with the clients still?
I do. I act as a volunteer still, and I facilitate a group of parents who have lost children. And as to Shelly's point is, and a word that you brought up earlier, I want to make note of is, you talked about, you mentioned the word safe, and that's really what CARA provides. It's a safe place, even especially the groups. People feel really safe that they can sit and they can be heard, or some of my groups that I facilitated and even seen others, someone may come and they may not say a word the entire night, but being in that same space with other people that have experienced similar losses, they learn from them, they walk away, and they come back the next week or the next time and they're like, this is the thing that's really helped me. Because what happens when you experience a loss, and whether it be something that you expected or something that happened suddenly, you feel very isolated and alone. And so when you're able to sit in a room with other people that maybe have experienced similar things, you don't feel so alone anymore. It's only the only normal day in your week, because you're expected to go to work, you're expected to do all the things that society expects you, and yet there's nothing there to help you. And so that's why, as a client, being part of a group myself, that was really helpful to me. And so now being able to continue to do that is really rewarding, because I'm able to see these other parents and other people and adults. I don't work with the children, I work with adults. I see them navigate on their grief journey and how they change and look at life differently. And it gives them a little hope.
Sure.
That it doesn't have to be, every day doesn't have to be bad, and things get a little bit better along the way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, I want just a couple more questions on the volunteers, and then we really want to get to the meat of what you do as well. But when a volunteer is interviewed and passes all, this is going to be, you've assured yourselves that this person is going to be a really helpful, good volunteer. Do you have some volunteers who are better for children, some volunteers who are better with adults or certain kinds of situations? And so do volunteers specialize essentially?
Most of our volunteers self-select. They know that they want to work with children, or they know that they want to work with adults. And we actually have a camp that we offer for kids every year. It's a 3-day camp.
How old are the kids?
The youngest is 6 to 17. And this is a free camp that we offer once a year, and we're in collaboration with other organizations and foundations. And some volunteers just get trained for that, and they come back every year.
And How many children are at that camp?
This year we have about 90.
Oh, that's a lot.
Yes.
Oh, but they're a series of 3-day camps. They're not 90 there for 3 days.
It's one
Oh.
weekend a year, and it's
Okay.
for 3 days, and we'll have 90 kids.
And so then with that many young people, you can segregate them, I assume. So you have the younger ones with other younger ones and the teenagers.
That's exactly right. That's exactly
As an
right.
example, last year I was a volunteer at the camp, and I had my boys were 9-year-old boys, and they all had lost either a mom or dad or someone very, very close to them. And it was a life-changing experience as much for me as it was for those children. But it was a special place for them to go and know that they're no longer different. All those 80 other kids, they've all experienced a loss, and so they're not the only one. They're not the boy or little girl in the class whose mom died, you know.
Yes, yes.
They're in the same group of people, and the camp there's a zip line, there's a swimming pool, and we do all these emotional support events, but there's all normal events, typical camping events, and it's a lot of fun.
Do they stay there overnight?
They do.
Okay.
They stay there overnight, and for some of these children, it's the first time they've ever met another kid who has had a brother
of course,
die, or
sure.
a grandpa die, or a mom
Especially
who,
the younger ones, I would guess.
Yeah.
right, or a mom who overdosed, or a dad who died by suicide. And so to be able to meet another kid is just, it's life-changing for them.
Oh, I can see where it would be.
Yeah.
Now, moving to the clients, as we're talking about clients now, when someone calls, which incidentally I assume that you have a number that people can call, you have a website and a phone number and
Yes.
all of those things.
Yes.
So you get someone contacting you. Now, what's the procedure? Someone contacts you.
Yeah. So they'll call the number, and they'll more than likely will get a live person that will just get basic information, name, phone number, address, and why they're calling. Basically, the person in their life who has died or anticipating their own death. And then it's given to one of the directors. That person actually gets a call back usually within 24 hours. And then that person, we talk on the phone and get a little bit more information to see kind of what it is that they think they need and are looking for. And at that point then, if they would like to pursue our services, because we tell them a little bit about our services, we set up an appointment where we do a more intensive intake.
They come into your agency
They
then?
come into the agency, and we get more background information. We learn more about the relationship in the person in their life who is either anticipating their own death or who has died. And then we look at the services that would be the best match for them. Sometimes they know that they want to be with just one person, or they really want to hear how other people are dealing with the loss of a child or the loss of a loved one by suicide, or maybe they want to be with just other men. And so we do have groups that are specific, and one of the unique things is most often clients are matched with a volunteer who has had a similar loss. So parent loss
That
is
puts that client at ease
exactly
right away.
suicide or parent loss or sibling loss. And so immediately there is this level of understanding that you get at least a part of it.
What was interesting to me is when you said earlier, Jim, that a client who goes into a group situation, it's okay, the person can just sit there and listen. That there isn't, so the group leader isn't saying, and how about you?
Right.
There's not that kind of pressure.
And not at all. And as a facilitator, we're trained primarily to listen, to be generous listeners, to allow the groups, the participants to help themselves. I often tell my group, it's your group. You are helping each other. We're learning from each other, and it's hard for me not to talk sometimes. I like to talk, but it is the group helping, and you see it evolve, and you see it mature, and you see it start to understand. And some of our groups are close-ended for a certain amount of time. Some are long-standing, where there's no specific closing date on them.
And people can just keep coming until they feel comfortable that they've gotten what they need.
That's right.
How many people are in a group? About?
It depends, but usually 5 to 10. I've been in groups as small as 4, but there's groups as large as 12. We have drop-in groups.
How does that work?
Shelley, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So our drop-in groups, we have one that meets during the day and we have one that meets in the evening. And those groups are facilitated by facilitators that have been with CARA for a very long time. In fact, our facilitators that facilitate the evening group have been facilitating that group together for almost 20 years.
And does the group have a does it address certain needs? I mean,
Basically, the only requirement is that you have had someone in your life, someone significant who has died. That is what the group is about.
and how many people in those groups?
Those
More,
groups-
because drop-in, so you can't know.
Drop-in,
But how?
they can range anywhere from 2 or 3 to 20.
Oh, it can be that large.
So it
on a
can-
given evening
It
Daytime.
exactly.
or daytime.
Yes.
And these sessions are all held at CARA.
Yes, they're all held at CARA. And I just wanted to also come back to the point about not being able to talk. Sometimes the fear of talking about something that is so painful, particularly with children, children sometimes don't even have the language yet
Right.
to express what they are experiencing or what they're feeling. And so all of our groups, whether you're 6, 16, or 66, you can come and have someone sit with you, and that in itself can be enough.
So a child could come and have a parent or an older sibling, or is that what you mean?
A child could come to a group for 5, 6 times and not have to say a word. We give them permission to just be,
That's
to just be. And so we give them the language, if they're not comfortable talking, that they can pass.
that's so important. Now, are some of your groups only children?
Yes. Yes.
And children of, in other words, children, for an example, 6 to 9, or
Yeah, our youth and family program, it is designed that very way, and so they'll have groups that are age specific. And what the interesting part about that is if it's a child who's lost a parent, there's usually a surviving parent, and they usually come that same night. So while the children are meeting for their group, the parents meet as well. So the parents are receiving support while the children are receiving support. And also logistically, it's easier that way too, so they don't have to have multiple things in the evenings. And typically, all of our youth and family program events happen at another site right down the road from our main site. And that's really, really special because the favorite thing the kids do, they have a steam room, they call it. And so for the children's groups, they have different things they go. They have a group setting, and then they each get a chance to go into the steam room. And it's a safe environment where there's pillows, you can have pillow fights, you can basically exert some energy.
is there really steam in there? I'm
No
picturing a
steam.
sauna or
No
okay.
steam.
But by the
Good.
time they come out, they're so
there's-
hot.
Okay, they can let off some steam.
But it's letting
Exactly,
off
that's why they call it the
steam.
steam room.
Got it.
And the kids love that because it's an opportunity for them to, show their emotions in a physical way. And there's rules, and it's special.
Sure, of
Everybody
course.
watches it, but it's one of the favorite things for the kids to do.
Now, how long does an individual session last? And you said, well, answer that one first, one of you, please.
So the individual sessions are usually an hour, 50 minutes to an hour, and the group sessions all are on a 1.5 hour.
Okay.
Yes.
And you said some group sessions are open-ended in the sense that they can go on for as long as they're. Does there ever come a time when you feel that maybe because you're limited in how many volunteers you have or what your facilities are, that you feel like someone has gotten as much as they're going to get out of your program, and you have to try and encourage them to move on, or not?
Well, it's a case-by-case basis, but sometimes we have signs that indicate that grief is still there. Grief is a lifelong process, but we get kind of indications. They're starting to talk more about life. They're starting to talk more
yes.
about engaging. Oftentimes in our spouse loss group, they're talking about dating, or maybe they've already found a relationship that they're ready to move on to. So our group in CARA is really designed to support that first kind of phase, acute time, and to try to help them integrate into other support networks, either in the community or even within their own group.
Now, what is the cost to the clients?
So most of our services are we don't charge a fee for, and they're donation based, and we people
The
often,
clients
will
can
give
donate
donations.
what they
or
feel they can.
friends. Most of our funding comes from donations primarily, but we do also have a clinical therapy program now that has a fee-based sliding scale schedule. But the majority of our services are, we do not charge a fee for them, which is really special because people don't feel like, if I can't have to pay for this, how can I get it?
Yes.
But it's amazing. Most of our clients are incredibly generous and they want to give back in some way, shape, or form with a donation of sorts.
Where does the rest of your funding come from?
Corporations, sometimes we'll get checks from corporations, and primarily individuals, like I said, and then non-governmental foundations. Oftentimes we get, but most of our individual donations, about 40 to 50% come from individual donations.
Now, if someone wanted to make a donation, how would they do that?
The best thing to do is to call our office, go online. That's even the simplest way. We have a great online Donate Now button, and they can make it.
I visited your website. I can attest to that.
And I have to share this story. We have a little boy that came to our agency, and he did a penny drive in his school because he heard about the camp that we run, and his friend had lost his father, and he wanted to say, wow, if I could get my friend to that camp, what a great thing. And so he did a penny drive in his school and raised over $100. And so if you go to our website now, you'll see his story and hopefully inspire you to help out
Now,
as well.
when children go to the camp, is there a cost to them
Not
to
at
go?
all.
Okay,
Camp-
just as any of your other programs.
Yes, that's
The
right.
average cost per child is about $1,500, and we waive that.
90 of them, that's a lot of
It
donations.
is.
Yeah.
It is.
Yes.
Well, and now, just briefly, because we're going to be running out of time, but what kind of outreach do you do to the schools, I assume? Do you cooperate with hospice, for example?
So we do a lot of outreach. That's our core in community outreach and education. So a lot of outreach to schools, hospitals, corporations.
And then, of course, all the individuals. And,
Right.
Well, we've just scratched the surface. I have about 100 more questions that I would love to ask, and I'm sure people would like to hear the answers, but we're running out of time.
Great.
But thank you so much for telling us about this really wonderful organization.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for having
just
us.
try and keep this in mind. Hopefully, as I said earlier, we don't like to think that we'll ever need it, but all of us will
Yes.
at some point.
Yes.
So thank you again for coming.
Well, we're glad to be here, and we're glad to serve the community.
Well, and everybody out there, keep in mind Cara. And thank you all for watching AAUW Connections.